Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Paul, for ably reading the words my mother gave you to say. Very much appreciated, and was one of the great honors of my life to be the CEO here. An amazing place, and thanks for all that you and Stephanie and everybody else in the team is doing each and every day. It's a pleasure to be with everybody. Sarah and I are going to converse for the next 45, 50 minutes, and then we will open it up to some questions from the audience. And I think just to ease us in here, we're going to do something a little bit not unscripted, but kind of like we just came up with just a few minutes before we started. So I think everybody has a copy of the book. And if you look at the front page, the front cover of the copy of your book, you will see this extraordinarily beautiful paper cut. Sarah, why don't you just very briefly take us through the paper cut?
I would be happy to, and I have to say, I'm so thrilled to be here today. This is a really wonderful institution, and I was telling a mutual friend of ours right beforehand, Barry is, he's my role model in the Jewish world. He is like a mentor, and he is a friend, and to be on stage with him is a total joy. And yes, his mother did write that for me as well, but I really like her, so it's fine. So this cover, actually, it's by a brilliant artist named Deborah Ugoretz, who was also a very patient artist because I had a lot of input and ideas. If you actually look at the lower right-hand corner, this is representing Jewish slavery in Egypt. The lower left-hand corner, that is study. And I made sure that it was a woman. This is the centrality of Jewish study. I think these sort of two kind of pillars of our existence, having been enslaved and going to freedom, the centrality of our texts and of study. There's then a tree of life in the middle of the house, and you can see the outermost branches are bare, representing the losses we've endured. On the kind of, you can sort of see the triangle with the stars, triangle with the stripes, that is the American flag to represent America. On to the right and left of the house, in the lower part of the cover, is Jerusalem imagery, representing Israel. You can see a little mourning dove on either side that's above the Jerusalem imagery, and these were birds that were sacrificed at our ancient temple in Jerusalem. If you go up to the kind of second story of the house, on the upper right corner, this is a couple celebrating at their wedding. On the upper left is actually someone being attacked by a Cossack, so that is, again, joy and oppression. In the middle of them is that dome with the heavens that I kind of wanted to represent. It's like the cosmos, Bereshit, kind of a, more of the spiritual side. If you go up to the roof, you see these are pomegranates, and some of them are rotted, some of them are whole. They actually represent fertility in Jewish tradition. Above them is a ner tamid, an eternal flame. That's the top to kind of represent the eternality of our people. And on the roof are two peacocks, which I just thought were fun. She had them in the original design on her website. And in Yiddish, I was thinking, how can I justify keeping the peacocks? Turns out in Yiddish literature, they're a symbol of good luck, so got to keep them.
Thanks, Sarah. I trust none of us will look at that cover the same way.
The idea was to represent just the complexity of Jewish existence, of what it means to be a Jew. The joy, the pain, the suffering, the happiness, all in one.
Beautiful. Great segue into the first question, which, easy way to ask it would be, can you just give us a quick overview of the book? But let me just, you often described your first book, and for those that haven't read it, it's called Here All Along. You've described it as a love letter to Jewish tradition. This book is a little edgier. That's, I think, abundantly clear from the title. As a Jew, reclaiming our story from those who blame, shame, and try to erase us. What inspired you to write this book, and also take some time to give us an overview of the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's, first of all, this book, I actually started this a year before October 7th. A lot of people say this book was a reaction to October 7th. It actually wasn't. It was really, I think I would say, a reaction to the Gaza war of 2021 and to kind of a shift that I began to feel in the wake of that war, both online, just kind of in the atmosphere. I experienced it firsthand in 2022 when I went to a college campus, again, a year before October 7th. And the students at the Hillel, the Jewish students, were asking me about antisemitism. And I was like, what? I went to college in the 90s. One of my classmates is actually here tonight, my friend Yoni. The idea of anti-Semitism on a campus was just bad. I could not wrap my mind around it. But these kids had all these stories. And what also inspired this is I started doing chaplaincy training to be a volunteer hospital chaplain during COVID. And again, even that word chaplain, right? It's like, that's a Christian word, right? Like, am I a Christian now? No. Chaplaincy is interfaith, but like many things in America that are ostensibly interfaith, they actually use Christian language, Christian ideas, and that's considered interfaith. That's considered universal because we live in such a Christian country. But I think doing this training, I began to really realize how soaked I had been in Christianity my whole life. And on my whole life, I'd actually viewed Judaism through Christian lenses. So, even like spirituality obviously is our bodies are bad and carnal and degraded, and there's a spirit realm that we want to escape the meat package to reach, right? Like body, spirit, separate, which is a Greek idea that is central to Christianity and by no means central to Judaism. We have a different concept of spirituality. I had no idea. But even how we engage with our texts, like my Christian patients would read the Bible and they would read it and they would tell me, like, this is very moving to me. I find my faith here. I feel comforted. I feel connected to God while I read these words. And like, that's how I thought you read the Torah. You just open it up and you read it and you're going to be like comforted and moved and inspired and like, maybe you will, or maybe you'll find the part that like Noah's 900 years old and there's a list of names and people are killing each other. Like, that's not how we read our text. We have 2,500 years of commentary and debate and discussion and reimagining of that biblical text. It's like I just thought like, oh, interesting. And then I really began to think, especially during COVID, as I'm watching, I'm thinking about anti-Semitism, I'm thinking about Christian dominance, I'm thinking about what I'm seeing online, and I thought a lot about my early Jewish identity as a child and a young adult, which was this humiliating, apologetic, like, I'm Jewish, but not that Jewish. It was never like, I'm Jewish, period, or I'm a Jew, period. It was, I'm Jewish, but just a cultural Jew. But no, it's just social justice. It's just tikkun olam. Why was I always doing that, right? That apologetic. And by the way, I was neither a social justice nor a cultural Jew. I knew nothing about cultural Judaism. If you do, and that's your Judaism, great, like wonderful. If you know about social justice through a Jewish lens, great. I knew none of that. I just meant that my identity was kind of this large, empty void with a few ethnic jokes rattling around in it. And, why was that? And, the answer that I give in this book is it was because of 2,000 years of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism and 250 years of Jews understandably trying to escape that persecution by erasing themselves, by assimilating. I realized my Jewish identity was so colonized by these forces of Jew hatred and spiritual suicide that I really had to kind of do some work of peeling back all of these layers of internalized shame, self-hatred, so that I could turn back to Jewish tradition through a Jewish lens, through eyes that were not disdainful or filled with shame, but were actually like open-hearted and kind of eager to hear the wisdom of my ancestors.
Yeah. Do you have any regret? We didn't talk about this. So
Yeah, no, please.
Do you have any regret not regret, but like, would you write the first book in the same way?
No.
Right, yeah.
I actually do. Someone told me that like your second book is where you correct the mistakes of your first book. And I actually was talking to a Jewish leader I so admire. And he said to me, he's like, 2 pieces of feedback. Number 1, never forget that you're like a thought leader with no actual responsibilities. So you can kind of run your mouth and you don't have to deal with the consequences. So be careful about what you say. Just like, wow, that is good advice. Second thing, he goes, your first book was missing 2 things, Israel and peoplehood. And I was like, yup, don't worry. You'll like my second book. My first book, I was sort of captivated by Jewish religion and spirituality and history and text. And I just wanted to share that. And Israel was scary to me. I was like, I don't know if I can defend. I don't know the sort of sin. And so I just copped out. Right? There's like a page on Israel that's like, it's fine, it's complicated, but I'm for it. It's a good refuge. We're not like, it's just like mortifying when I think about this. And I think that I just missed, like, peoplehood is so fundamental to who we are. And I was so interested in the content, the wisdom, that whatever. And I think those weren't like strategic decisions. They were just where I was. I started writing that in 2017. It was published in 2019. You change a lot over that much time.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come back to something about Israel a little bit later. But there's I'm struck by what that person said. I think I have a hunch of who it is.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Yeah. But I'm also thinking about the connection between Israel and peoplehood, where for some reason we separate Israel from peoplehood as Americans. I often say that if I told the audience tonight, I just came back from Odessa and I met this 87-year-old woman who was hungry and didn't have any money, and could you all send me $50 so that she could have a hot meal every week of the year? Before I finished my sentence, everybody in this room would have Venmoed me, and we see her as part of Jewish peoplehood. Yes. And I think for Israelis, often we look upon them as different, and maybe we'll kind of unpack that a little bit later. So that's just an
They're definitely connected.
Yeah,
there's a lot of history to that.
Yeah. So the title, let's just talk about that for a second. It's bold, right? I think it would always been bold, but certainly in the last couple of years, it almost sounds like you're kind of like stepping into the public square and claiming a position. So why that title, and what did it mean for you personally to write it from inside the identity as opposed to an observer?
Yeah. So I'm terrible with titles. It's always a nightmarish process with like multiple lists. I poll my friends a million times. They hate me. It's like my editor wants to kill me. I was just struggling with this book. And I traveled to Israel a few months after October 7th, and I had the incredible privilege of getting to meet Amir Tibon and his father. I don't know if for those of you who don't know, like Amir and his family were trapped on their kibbutz in the south. His father, a retired military general, gets in the car with his mother, of course, and drives down the country, getting into firefights, rescuing people. It is the most mind-boggling story. Rescues the family, thank God. And I was talking to Amir afterwards and telling him about the book, and he asked if I had a title. I said no, and he said, well, how about As a Jew? I thought, like, okay, that's interesting. My primary reason for choosing it is it's sort of not a rebuke to my younger self, but a transcending of my younger self, where there's no caveat or apology here. It's not as a cultural, ethnic, social justice, not that as a Jew, not a Jewish person, not a person of the Jewish heritage because we're uncomfortable because Jew sounds like a slur. It's not. It's what we are. So just say it. So that was the primary reason. And the second reason was like, if we're playing the game of like, as a Jew, I think, Israel is a Nazi state. Like, if we're going to play that game, like, I definitely want to play. And I think I'm going to be pretty good at playing, and I'd like to win. So I just thought, like, I'm going to play this game too. Like, if we're going to use our Jewishness to attack our members of our Jewish family, I'd like to use it to like celebrate our family. So that was the reasoning behind it.
Did you get any pushback from people that you trust or people that you seek advice, publisher, anything?
A lot of people didn't get the title. Like at first, some people were like, I don't know. Even I was like, I'm not sure, but it kind of grew on all of us. I at one point it was like As a Jew Without Apology. It was like Jew: a reckoning. We went through so many different versions, like a Jewish Without Apology. It was such a nightmare, but I love this title. It really feels right to me.
It does. And just on your, like, how would you rebuke yourself when you look back at your childhood and?
Here's the thing. Rebuking, it doesn't really work because I wouldn't have understood the rebuke. But I think I would just say, like, listen, the Judaism you grew up with is a result of persecution. It's not actually like you're missing out on 99.999% of the tradition. So don't judge this by kind of the crap you've seen. Like, it's actually so extraordinary and so much better than so much of what you think is profound. So I think I would just try to like tell myself there's so much more.
Yeah, for sure. I also had the privilege of spending time with Amir and Noam Tibon and got that whole story. And the end of that story is he literally makes his way to the kibbutz where his son is, and his son and his family are in the mamad, are in the safe room. And after being in there for 12 hours, and he knocks on the door and he says his voice, and his granddaughter says softly, Safta Pa. Saba Pa. Grandpa's here. And that was just like, when I heard that moment from him, I'm just, trying to imagine the whole.
The kids were really little. It's a harrowing story, which he has a book out called The Gates of Gaza. Yeah. Well worth reading.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier, you and me, when we were, in the office earlier, just a little bit about kind of like the, and you get into it in the book about, just how important it is to have some real literacy and kind of like this kind of hollowing out that there's been of like Jewish education. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of like your views on that, what you're seeing on college campuses around that as you're talking to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in the 80s and 90s when I grew up, if your Jewish identity, like mine back then, was just the empty void with the ethnic jokes, that was kind of okay. At least where I grew up in America, people were not going around trashing Jews, Israel, whatever. Like my identity was filled by other stuff that wasn't particularly anti-Jewish. But if you are a Jew who has that empty void Jewish identity today, it will be filled, and it will be filled by what's around you, which is a ton of anti-Semitism. And I think what I see, I'm spending a lot of time I've visited nearly 30 college campuses, and I think what is just so hard is that these kids who just don't know anything, they will kind of believe whatever is told to them. And we keep saying like, yeah, we've got to fight anti-Semitism. And oftentimes the way we think of fighting anti-Semitism is by fighting the anti-Semites. Like we'll have like a really good PR campaign. We'll wear a blue square. We'll put up a sign, we'll do this stuff. And I just, we're talking about a habit of mind that is thousands of years old, that is baked into the religious traditions of half the world's population. And this idea that like we're going to fight that is just, it's not quite true. But even if we were, if you have that empty void Jewish identity, you are utterly useless and helpless in fighting anti-Semitism. Because if someone says to you, Jewish tradition is violent and vengeful with an angry God and it's totally unspiritual and unloving, if you're the empty void, what will you say back? Like, bagels. It's just not a great response. Or like, Israel is a colonial apartheid state and doesn't deserve to exist and Jews aren't indigenous. If you know nothing about Jewish history or Israel, what are you going to be like, Tikkun Olam? Like, it's not a great response, right? You don't know what you're fighting for. You have nothing to say back. And so I think, the idea that we're going to fight anti-Semitism, A, I think it's pretty unlikely. B, if we don't know anything, we will definitely not fight anti-Semitism. So much of fighting anti-Semitism is making sure that Jews know who they are and what their story is, what this is about, so that even if we can't change the haters' minds, we can at least be sturdy against them. We can know that they're lying. That's the key. Like, this is, the early Zionist thinker Ahad Ha'am, he talked about this problem of general agreement, where like the majorities around us, there is a general agreement that Jews drink baby's blood and put it in matzah. Like that was the general agreement in medieval times, the blood libel. That was what all the thinking people thought. And if you were a really ignorant Jew, you'd be like, oh God, I guess we do. Yikes. But if you were a Jew who knew Jewish law, you'd be like, our law prohibits blood. Of course we don't do that. Like that's absurd. And I think the same is true today, right? Like if you're a Jew who just doesn't know anything about Israel and someone tells you, this was like white people who came in and stole the land from brown people and there's no indigeneity, why wouldn't you believe them, right? Why wouldn't you believe them?
Yeah. I mean, I could completely concur. And, two comments. First of all, anti-Semitism is not for Jews to solve. Right.
Nope.
A, we can't solve it, and B, it's not our problem. Right. We're the victims of it, but it's not within our control. I do believe that. And also, to your point, the best antidote for anti-Semitism is Semitism. And Semitism has to come from a knowledge base, and again, I don't want to. I'm just kind of wondering on your thoughts around this. I don't want to suggest that going into the inner city of Oakland and painting a school that is dilapidated is a bad thing to do. It's an incredibly wonderful thing to do as a Jew. It's an incredibly wonderful thing to do as a human being. And Jews responsible for repairing the world, but you know what? The Jesuits will tell you that they want to repair the world, and Christians will tell you, and Muslims will tell you everybody will tell you that they want to repair the world. The question is, why do we want to repair the world? What's in that? What's uniquely Jewish about that? And in that sense, did you get a sense from your college conversations that there is actually a thirst for knowledge?
Oh, hugely. I mean, there's a thirst. I mean, among college students and among adults in general, right? Like Jews, I always get this weird gaslighting where people are like, oh, Sarah, you always go on about Jewish study because you're an egghead and you're an intellect and you read books. I'm like, have you been to a Jew's house? They have so many books, and Jews generally graduate from high school. You have to read books. Many of us graduate from college, books, right? We read books all day long, and some of them I think are, they're kind of trashy, right? We want the self-help. We want the how to live a better life, and we read Brené Brown and all of these parenting. We read books all day long. We thirst for knowledge, and I think that the problem is that many Jews don't know there is knowledge in Judaism. I did not. And I think the historical reasons for that are kind of devastating, but the reality is most American Jews have European roots, although many Jews do not. But in America, we tend to be European. And in the early 1800s in Europe, when Jews were finally allowed to be citizens of European countries, they wanted to go to universities and get jobs. And they kind of had to reinvent this old shtetl Judaism, which was very insular. It was pre-modern. It was living by Jewish law in Jewish languages. They had to fit into Germany and France. And they reimagined Judaism as a Protestant-style religion, right? It was like they have a church, we have a Jew church. They have the Old Testament, so do we came up with it. So we are prophetic Jews, right? That 2,500 years of commentary, debate, texts that are the beating heart of Jewish tradition, it was like, they don't have that. They are also very disdainful of that. Like, well, stuff that aside, right? We are Frenchmen of the Jewish faith. We are Germans of the Mosaic, as in Moses, persuasion. And I think so many of the problems that we're dealing with today are the fallout of that decision that we made 250 years ago. And I'm so grateful that my ancestors did that, right? They invented a kind of Judaism that works in modernity. But it's a little like Christianity without Jesus. You can do it, right? You can talk about the Old Testament and goodness and kindness. Unitarians kind of do it. Not that, you don't see a lot of Unitarians, right? I think in a way the Judaism we came up with by kind of ripping away the beating heart textual tradition, it's a little lacking. And I think that's what Jews are yearning for, is that Jewish wisdom. So many Jews who read my first book, which is about that wisdom, were like, what? Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. It was just like, but again, if you're a Jew like me growing up, whose only points of contact with Judaism are 2 boring services, a boring Seder, and a Hanukkah party, why would you know there's 4,000 years of wisdom about the human condition? And I gotta say, unfortunately, I think we are today kind of, again, getting kind of hit with the legacy of that in the kind of anti-Zionism that we're seeing among a lot of people. Because, look, if Judaism is a religion like Christianity, and you see those 7 million Jews in Israel as your co-religionists, and if they're not doing your religion of Tikkun Olam, then forget them, right? It's like a mainline Protestant who's super progressive in Berkeley telling her that she has to care about a Pentecostal in Brazil who's speaking in tongues. She would just look at you and say, like, that's chauvinist. What? Just because we're both Christians? Excuse me. Like, that would almost be offensive to her. But like, we're not a religion. That Judaism is not just a religion. We can all reject, those of us who are Jewish can reject every aspect of Jewish religion. We're still Jews. We're not a race. Jews are very diverse racially. We're not an ethnicity. Jews are very diverse ethnically. We predate those categories. We are a peoplehood, a nation, a tribe, a civilization, but most of all, we are a family. So I think we made a category error a couple of hundred years ago by saying we're a religion when really we're a family. So those Jews in Israel, they're not my co-religionists, they are my mom. And like, I have a different level of caring for people in Israel than I do just for my co-religionists because they are my family. And so I think today, anti-Zionism, it's kind of easier to do because if you don't see them as your family, then like, who cares? Of course I can be against them. What's the problem here? So I think we're now like struggling with that.
There's a lot there. And not such an easy job, up here. Just saying, have some Rachmanis for the guy up here. So let's just keep going down that road just a little bit. So we and let's talk. I mean, it's a little bit of a segue, but you'll see where I'm going.
Yeah.
Let's talk about staying with the people yearning for information, yearning for knowledge. They're not getting it. And the place where they are getting it, which generally for our young people, and I would suggest for most of us in this room as well, which is, some form of the evilness that sits in our pockets, right? Which through social media. And kind of what's your views and perspectives on that as it pertains to anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and how that is feeding and working on our minds, but I think more importantly on younger people's minds?
So everywhere I go, and I'm speaking all over the country, inevitably afterwards, lovely middle-aged people my age, come up to me and they say, like, I sent my kid to Jewish day school or Hebrew school. We did Shabbat every week. I love being Jewish. and my kid came home from college or oftentimes high school and is calling me a Nazi and talking about genocide and like, what did I do wrong? And I'm always just like, nothing. You did nothing wrong. Your kid has a phone. And and the reason I want to be very clear, like, before phones, the media you got in America was American media. If you wanted global media, you had to go to a very weird bookstore to find it. The media you also got was largely mainstream. 3 evening news channels, morning newspapers, that was your news. If you wanted the fringe stuff, again, you had to send away from it. It came in a package. Like, it was a real hassle, right? And both American and mainstream media were pretty sane about Israel. It went up and down. There was bias. I get it. But like overall, I think the coverage was like reasonably neutral to positive, waxed and waned, but still. Today we get our news from social media. Social media is a global medium. On it are billions of people who hate Jews. Algorithms are shaped by majority rule. The algorithms are now like, if you wanted Al Jazeera 20 or 30 years ago, good luck finding it. Today, Al Jazeera will find your kid. This is where a lot of young people get their news, right? The fringe outlets will find your kid, and they're being powered by billions of people who hate Jews. So this is a problem, right? This is a big problem. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think this is now a big thing in the podcast sphere, or at least the ones I listen to, this idea of we're really entering a post-literate society where we're seeing less and less text we're reading less and less. Facebook was a lot of text, and then it was Instagram, and now it's TikTok, right? We're just seeing more and more video. And here's the problem. Like, when your brain, especially your developing brain, is being smashed all day long by videos of carnage in Gaza, which is awful, right? Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's a war. It is horrifying, heart-wrenching scenes. You're just being smashed with that all day long. No context, no history, no text, no information, which again, 20 or 30 years ago, there would have been an article you would have read. There would have been a news story on the news. And again, would it have been perfect? No. I'm sure we would have disagreed with, but there was like text and context. But today, so many of us are living in this kind of eternal, ahistorical, decontextualized present. So all you see is carnage, carnage, carnage. Israelis are genocidal maniacs, period, end of story. And I will tell you, as someone trying to speak publicly about Israel, I found it very hard. And I was working with some people to help me prepare for, speaking about this. And they were like, here's this argument and that argument. And I just got so angry at them at one point. And I was like, I'm sorry, what I'm about to say is a little bit graphic. I'm sorry. But I said to him, I have to make those arguments through a wall of dead babies. I hate to say this to you. Like, it's so easy for you to say that. But when I'm making these arguments, it is to people who have just seen hour after hour of carnage, and me being like, well, but it's only 1.5 civilians per military. It's like, you're a monster. You're obscene. I'm in the decontextualized, ahistorical, non-informational present. And it is very hard to have a rational conversation. So I think this is kind of what we're living in. And I got to tell you, if I was the principal of a Jewish day school, my rule would be no child at this school owns a phone until senior year. And they get it, and we sit down for a week, we have a retreat, we talk about how to use it. And they really begin to see how this is messing up their brain. We give their brains a chance to develop. We give them a chance to be sane, thinking human beings before these social media companies destroy them.
Yeah, Let
me tell you, and this has to be a system-wide thing. We cannot... Parents, it is so unfair what we do to parents. You can't be the one parent who doesn't give your kid a phone. We are putting this whole weight on parents' shoulders. It is cruel and it is like unforgivable. So I want to we need to be advocates for parents. Like, that's what our Jewish institutions need to help parents, because this is just not fair.
Yeah, there's one segment of the population that has done a pretty good job of not giving their kids phones until they're older, and that's the Silicon Valley execs who created this. Seriously, because they know. So I just want to give you a second and to just to take a breath, and also just thinking about the whole information thing. We talked about this a little bit earlier on, but a few months ago I was with a gentleman in Israel called Dr. Zohar Raviv, who some of you know, who's one of the great Jewish educators of our time. And he explained to me the following, that if there's a triangle, when we were younger, you would get a piece of information at the top of the triangle, And so you'd hear this piece of information, and what you would do is you would go down to the bottom left of the triangle and you would gain knowledge. So you get a piece of information, you would read a book, you'd read an article, you'd listen to a podcast, you'd gain a whole bunch of knowledge around that piece of information, and then from there you would put it through who you were as a human being, 59-year-old guy living in San Francisco, originally from Scotland, and you develop an opinion. So information, knowledge, opinion. And now, and I love the adjective that you use about they're getting smashed with it. Now you get a piece of information which is usually in 140 characters or less, or a 20-second video, and you go straight to opinion, right? And this piece here is the massive red flashing light for society, because a society used the term post-literate. A society without knowledge is chaos and anarchy, which is all right. Let's get back to the book a little bit. I mean, we're in the book, but come at you. Just for a second to somewhat a little bit, not lighter, if you say, but was there something in your research that was surprising? Maybe a text, a teacher, a moment that like, oh, this has kind of like changed my thinking. And I'm sure there were probably more than one.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, Dara Horn, who's one of my best friends, we went to college together 30 years ago, reading her essay, The Cool Jews, which is about the idea of this kind of conversionist anti-Semitism, I realized just how much Holocaust education just does a great job of really confusing everyone about anti-Semitism, because that's the eliminationist anti-Semitism. Jews are bad, we kill them, end of story. But Dara points out that a lot of the anti-Semitism we're seeing today is like, Jews are bad, but if they convert, maybe we won't kill them. So like, Middle Ages, convert to Christianity, maybe you don't die. My grandparents' generation, change your name and nose, become a WASP, maybe you're okay. And today it's like, convert to anti-Zionism. And I think once I began to see that, I began to really understand what was happening on college campuses. This kind of conversion narrative of like, growing up, my rabbi told me Israel was great. Then I got to campus and I learned it was genocidal, and I had an epiphany. I saw the light. I took anti-Zionism into my heart, and now I'm saved. And other classmates are like, now you're saved. Like, that's the, that conversionist piece. And I think, reading that piece made me begin to understand how Holocaust education, which was such a good bet, and when we first came up with it, it was really like, never again. We're going to teach the world not to do this again. The problem is that what it teaches you is that like big, scary, powerful Nazis murdered skinny, little, helpless Jews. Just like, and you think, that's like anti-black, that's like black racism, which is like big, powerful white people brutalizing really helpless, powerless black people. Like, okay, I got it. And so you think today, I'm seeing on social media, big, powerful Israelis killing little, skinny Palestinians. The message of the Holocaust is anti-Zionism, right? That's it. We fight the big, powerful Nazis who are today the Jews. And that's not what the Germans said about the Jews. The Germans said the Jews are the big, powerful people who are destroying our economy. They caused the Depression. They made us lose World War I. These group of Jews, they are threatening. They're hurting innocent Germans. We have to do something about this. They were 1% of the German population again. But it was actually, but that's not what you remember when you're 13. Holocaust education also doesn't teach you the real cause of the Holocaust, which was 2,000 years of Christian anti-Judaism, right? And that is the work of Christian scholars, not me. But Christianity, it took these early pagan ideas of Jews being different and bad and gross and really theologized them into an idea that Jews are diabolically powerful, deeply depraved, and in a conspiracy to harm you. That made its way through the Western world, and it made its way into the Muslim world, and now you see it in Islamism. And Muslims had their own negative ideas of Jews that weren't so toxic, but they mixed with Christian ideas, and now you see this in like Hamas, Al-Qaeda, these very anti-Semitic ideas. And the Soviets got into the action, but of course they didn't hate Jews, they hated Zionists, obviously. This is like, Holocaust education doesn't teach you about Christian anti-Judaism or Soviet anti-Semitism or Islamist anti-Semitism, all of which are the toxic brew that compose anti-Semitism today. So, if you think that anti-Semitism is like Nazi racial anti-Semitism, you probably won't see a lot of that on your college campus. And so you're like,
doesn't exist.
It's great. So the number of times I have to explain to college students who tell me there's not anti-Semitism on their campus, I'm like, okay, let's try this. Let's just say that your classmates were very upset about the Chinese government's policies and actions. And so They said to your Chinese American classmates, you guys have to reject China entirely. If you visit your family there, if you study abroad there, if you speak Chinese, if you say anything nice about Chinese culture or language or history or art, you are a monster and we're going to ban you from our clubs. And we're going to hold these big noisy protests where we scream, we don't want no China lovers here, and Chinese equal Nazis. Like, is anyone going to be like, well, that's really critique of the Chinese government? No. Are we going to really have a debate about whether this is like just anti-China, blah, blah, or it's racism? No, we're not. I think we'd all be like, feels like racism to me. I don't think so. But like, they can't really see that because, again, there are no Nazis and no swastikas. So like, probably not anti-Semitism. So I think this is a tough nut that we have to crack. Like, I think we're going to need a new generation of Holocaust education that A, actually teaches what caused the Holocaust, which good luck in an American public school, and B, like, does a better job of actual anti-Semitism education rather than just Holocaust education.
Wow. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, we've spent a lot on Holocaust education, over the years, and I think I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it, and of course, and I know you were saying this too. It all comes from a very, very good, place, and we could not have forecasted some of the things. But it does talk. But you are raising some of the
and look, we need Holocaust education.
Of course,
I mean, the idea of we're going to get rid of this, like, I think that's a terrible idea. But I think that we need to kind of, when the memory of the Holocaust is so much less fresh, and when these ideas about Jews and power are so present now, we're going to have to really rethink how we teach this. Yeah.
Just there's so many great pieces in the book, and I had the privilege of reading the book, early on. And
Barry's comments on my drafts were very important.
I mean, it really was. It was like, and my wife's here, so she'll tell you, I'm not the most avid reader. Might be a little bit of an understatement, but this run, kind of like really, really got me. And I was thinking, we're all on this lifelong learning journey, and we are all Jewish illiterate, right? Regardless of what our levels of literacy are, we're always just going on a journey. Do you have any advice of just for people here tonight, just like how to begin to ground yourself in some study and in some practice? Because, it feels daunting. It would feel as daunting to me, to start learning something about a religion. Like somebody said, I want to learn about, Islam. I wouldn't know where to start, right? So,
Totally.
Like, where's a good place to start?
First of all, I love this question because what you're asking about is adult education. And I think so often when we talk about Jewish literacy, everyone is obsessed with kids. The problem is Hebrew school. The problem is this. Hebrew school's fine, guys. Hebrew school will not make your kid Jewish in 2 hours a week. Parents make their kids Jewish. And the thing that's so hard is that, most of us are not adult Jews. 12 years ago, I was not an adult Jew. I had to grow up, and it was hard. And it's not our fault. It is the fault of our persecutors who made us go through this trauma of erasing ourselves so we are ignorant. So let's stop with the I'm a bad Jew. No one's a bad Jew, right? We are Jews who had a rough transition to modernity and are dealing with the fallout now. We're all good Jews, and now we can be actually educated Jews. So I think I don't know what to do about kids. I'm not a child educator, but I do know what to do about adults, which is that we have to become adult Jews, and then you'll know how to raise Jewish kids. So how do you do this? It's not easy. I found this was the hardest thing I've ever done. I started out just reading Intro to Judaism books, and a lot of them are great with the nuts and bolts, the how-to, but I was like, okay, but what about the why-to? And so then I had to turn these very sophisticated books, and that was a slog. And I was like, my God. So I actually wrote my first book to answer this as an answer to this question, okay, how do you get started, right? How do you enter into this tradition? And it actually has an appendix of resources at the back. So the way that it worked for me, I learned by reading, and I like reading books or listening to books if you're more of a ear learner. I like it because I could do it at my own pace, in my own time. I sometimes had to read books 3 or 4 times before I really got them. And it was and I didn't have to look stupid, right? I could just do this alone. So for me, it was reading intro books and then going a little deeper. I'm like, okay, I now have the context. Books like Rabbi Joseph Telushin has a book called Jewish Literacy, where it's just every topic in Judaism in 3 to 4 pages. Read a few essays a night, And by the end, you will have a great web of context in which to catch Judaism. If you're more of like a community or classroom learner, you can find an Intro to Judaism class at your local synagogue, JCC, Federation. Like they're offered. They're generally affordable. If you can't afford them, they will make it work for you. Like you can do this. If you are someone, if you don't want to do that, just like starting to kind of go on websites and listen to lectures, like you can just kind of go around the internet. But I really do think like the intro books, the intro classes are a good way to get started. Then you'll get a sense of like, okay, I know the landscape. I'm really excited about Jewish spirituality. Well, then maybe you'll find your way to the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, the Jewish Meditation World. There is a great bunch of spiritual books and podcasts. Or maybe you'll say like, I love Shabbat. And maybe that will become your thing. And you'll, however you want to be Jewish is fine. There's millions of different ways to be a committed, learned, proud Jew. But one way that isn't is to be contentless. That is actually the one way to be a bad Jew in my mind.
Well said. I just was thinking a bit recently about Gladwell's book Outliers, where he, posits about, you need 10,000 hours to be an expert in anything. And he uses the Beatles as an example, where he's like, they just didn't come out on the Ed Sullivan Show and sing, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and that was it, right? They'd practiced for literally hours and hours, over 10,000 in crappy little nightclubs in Berlin, Germany, to hone their art. And so, there is no replacement for content, right? So there are no shortcuts to knowledge. So if you want to learn about Shabbat, then you got to learn about Shabbat, and you got to get in, and you can. And it's not just lighting a candle, which is not meaningless. So
right. Look, experiences are great, but again, we think of Judaism as a religion. So we're like, if I believe in God, then I am a Jew. Like we think about it like Christianity as a faith. It's not. It's a civilization. It's a tribe. You have to learn its customs, rituals, wisdom, history, languages. Although I don't think you have to learn Hebrew. I mean, if you want to go really high level, you do. But like, I wrote my first 2 books without Hebrew, so you're fine.
Yeah. All right, so let's do because I think they'll probably be in the Q&A. Let's do a little Israel thing, right? Then one kind of final question, and then we'll open it up. So get thinking, peeps. So in this kind of like significantly polarized moment, just what does it mean? What do you think if you have the entire Jewish community of North America right here, and you want to say, what does it mean to engage with Israel as a Jew without falling into the trap of, ideology over humanity? Like, what does it mean? What is our responsibility as American Jews to engage?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, it's solving that, like, family versus religion problem and understanding this is our family, and understanding that, like, racist Uncle Bernie gets to come to the Seder, and we're going to fight with him and try to change his mind and really crack down on him. But, like, he's our family, sorry. I think also, we spent a lot of time defending, like, Israel, which often amounts to defending the actions of the government, the actions of this person, explaining, well, okay, that person is terrible, we admit, but this person, okay, and here's why they did it. Like, I think we've kind of lost the art of defending Zionism. And, this is a real problem because anti-Zionism it's a rising force. And I feel ridiculous even having this conversation because Zionism is done. In 1948, we found Israel. So, like, why are we still, I don't even know why we're still talking about it because of our haters, but here we are. And so I really try to make a very clear argument about what Zionism is because it has definitely been hijacked by people who hate Israel and hate Jews. So I want to be very clear, like, Zionism is the national independence movement of the Jewish people. It is the belief that Jews have the same right to national self-determination in Israel as Latvians have in Latvia and Japanese people have in Japan, and I hope Palestinians will one day have in Palestine. And the reason I believe that is because for 2,000 years, we ran the counter experiment, and the result was millions of dead Jews. And once we actually did have a state, the result was hundreds of thousands of saved Jews. So when Jews were brutally persecuted in the Arab world in the mid-20th century, this is not ancient history, this is like our great-grandparents, 650,000 Arab Jews fled to Israel. When millions of Russian Jews were persecuted, 1 million of them fled to Israel. That was like in my lifetime. When Ethiopian Jews, also in my lifetime, 100,000 of them fled persecution in Ethiopia to Israel. Right? If there was not Israel, those people would be in a very bad place. When Jews are stateless, it does not go well. And I'm really, really, I cannot tell you how outrageous and appalling I find this, like, bizarre idea from the far left, this fetishization of exile. Like exile was so beautiful and wonderful, and that's our natural state, and we had beautiful communities. It was so in our culture. And you know what? We did form beautiful communities. We did have amazing cultures and achievements. We're an extraordinarily resilient people. I don't want to take that away from us, but also they slaughtered us by the millions. To me, that is like saying to someone who's Black, like, you guys did so well under segregation. You founded historically Black colleges and universities. You founded hospitals. You had strong, vibrant churches. You had educated people. I mean, like, actually, Black Americans performed extraordinarily well under brutal circumstances, like the courage, the resilience, the creativity. But to say to them, so we should go back to segregation, it's like, are you kidding me? That's what that argument sounds like. That's a little aside, but I do want to just put that out there. So, and I also, once I've sort of made the argument for Zionism, I'm like, I want to be clear. Like, I disagree with the current Israeli government. I do not like the prime minister. I do not like the lunatics in his government. I do not like many of their policies. And I am also a proud, patriotic American who loves this country, and I do not like our current president. I'm a proud, patriotic American who loves my country, regardless of who is in the White House. By the same token, I am a Zionist, regardless of who is in the Knesset, regardless of who is the prime minister. It's the same concept. So I think disentangling Zionism from the current Israeli government, I think is an important thing to do, and drawing that analogy to American patriotism and the current American government, I think that begins to give people a container to hold this. And I will say one other thing, I talk about this in the book. I really want to normalize Israel as a country, because I think we tend to exceptionalize it, and it is exceptional, right? Israel's a miracle. I think it's exceptional in my heart. I also think it's a country, and countries are founded in violence and maintained in violence. They're generally pretty crappy, including our own. I hate to break it to you. And I think that we need to teach young people, like, Israel is a country. It was founded in this way, which seems kind of messy and ugly, but oh, surprise, every country, like, in the area was founded in that same way. Bummer. Wish it were different. Wish they had been conceived with rainbows and moonbeams and unicorns. That's not how countries are founded. Like, this is actually explaining that Israel is a pretty normal country in many ways, while also exceptional and miraculous. I think we've gotten the balance wrong because we feel so defensive, and we feel like we have to give them all the good stuff and hide the bad stuff. But they have phones, and they're going to go to college, and they're going to learn about the not so great stuff that every country has. So they need that container of, oh, Israel's a country. Right. I know that bad fact. And guess what? Every country founded that way had that fact. FYI.
That's a great answer, and also strikes me around that all makes perfect sense. And if you're a young person and you're getting smashed all the time, it's hard to have that signal in the noise. Okay, so before we open it up, just like, what's next for Sarah Hurwitz?
Well, I am very excited. I'm starting a rabbinic program at the Hartman Institute, in the Shalom Hartman Institute, which Jim Joseph Foundation is a big supporter of. And I'm so grateful for this program, because it's really a program geared towards people like me who are, have had a little bit of a career, are kind of, are adults. It's a program where the students are Zionists, which is nice. Like, it's and it's a really diverse program. It's pluralistic. So my classmates are just across the spectrum of practice and belief. And it's going to be a really just rigorous, intellectually exciting program with some of the top scholars. And I'm really excited to do it because, I don't have a systemic Jewish education, and I really need one. The kind of shtick of like, I'm a Jew just like you. I just read some books. Like, it doesn't really work anymore, right? Like, I appreciate my story is relatable, because I think my Jewish identity for most of my life is like the number one most common Jewish identity. But, rabbis are people, like, I look at someone like Rabbi Sharon Brous and Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, and like, if someone wants someone to speak out about Judaism, they should ask someone with the title rabbi, because they've done the work. They've gotten that education. They've earned that. They've been kind of given, they've earned it. And I feel like I haven't done that. And so, like, I want to do that work so that I can also kind of join in that conversation in the way that amazing rabbis like they do.
More books?
Yes, I would like to. I'm not going to have a congregation, but I want to spend the rest of my life writing books about Judaism and really just speaking, teaching, really just helping Jews do what I did, which is to become an adult Jew. And it's not easy, and I really want to make it easier.
Great. Thank you. Wow. All right. Stephanie and Forrest, I think, are walking around.
Hi, thank you so much for being here.
course.
My parents saw you in Philadelphia a few weeks ago, but
Oh.
they didn't get to ask a question.
Oh my gosh,
so I am
amazing.
asking the question for my mom.
I love this.
And
There's
my
a
friend
great
is
community.
recording it, so I can send it to her.
Please.
But okay, so in your book, relatively early on, I think it was around page 15 or so, mentions that some of your progressive friends and acquaintances expressed significant anti-Zionist sentiments post-October 7th, and that it has damaged your relationship. Do you think that there is a time, and if so, under what circumstances, could you see a reconciliation? Do you think that's at all possible? Thank you.
It's a great question. This is a tough one, and I think this is sort of a matter of degree and discernment. I have a couple of friends who the stuff they're posting on Facebook is just so hateful and shocking that it's like, and for these two people particularly, they come from a culture and a history where it's like it's very much kind of part of that their community and and it's like I'm not, they're not close enough friends that I'm going to take the time to do this. Like, I'm not going to convince them. And I always tell college students, don't talk to the foaming at the mouths ideologues who are screaming at you and calling you a Nazi. Like, if that's fun for you, I'm not going to stop you. But like, that's not really a great use of your time. A better use of your time is the person who says, look, I have really strong feelings, but I want to know your feelings too. And let's just talk. Or the person who says, I know nothing. Can you tell me things? Like, those are great people to talk to. So I think, look, I have a friend who is, he's Palestinian, and we do talk and we disagree, but I really respect him. He's very thoughtful. He is very knowledgeable. So like talking to him like this and he's very intellectually honest. So that is a learning experience for me. And we don't agree, right? We come away not really agreeing, but that's okay. I think for me, I also have friends where like I know where they stand, and we're just not going to talk about it. And post October 7th, there is some distance, right? Like it's not going to be repaired in a way. And I hate to say this, and I actually said this in my book. Post October 7th, and even frankly, in some ways, post 2021, I've kind of in my mind moved in my mind. There's a little bit of a shtetl where I live, and I kind of just know where everyone in my life lives in relation to my shtetl. And my shtetl is filled with non-Jews, by the way. The mayor of my shtetl is a Presbyterian minister in Canada whose Hebrew is better than mine, who studies Yiddish so he can read Holocaust literature in the original because he finds it disrespectful to read in translation, whose life work is dealing with anti-Semitism in the church. Like, that guy is the mayor of my shtetl. So this isn't really a Jew, non-Jew thing. It's just to like, kind of where some people are right outside the shtetl. Some people will warn me if the Cossacks are coming. The people who are the Cossacks, I know that. It's just like I just know where people live, and it's weird, right? It's like I think many of us have found ourselves doing it, but that's called being a Jew. I think for some number of decades, we were like, oh no, we're Americans of the Jewish flavor. So fun. And I think that was, and I think Israelis thought they were Israelis, right? And it's like, okay, no, we're Jews. Like, we didn't actually escape history, which actually, that's not devastating to me in the way that I think about my bubby all the time, who until she was 36 years old, there was no Israel. And so she lived through the 1920s and 1930s and in the 1940s, most of them just staring into the abyss. And just the terror she must have felt in the 1930s in America as Father Coughlin is, spewing hatred to millions of Americans. Anti-Semitism was just shocking and rampant then. The fear she must have felt that like, my refuge, like America was the new Zion. It was the refuge, that the refuge was feeling unsafe. She had nowhere to go. Like, we have somewhere to go. So again, like, I feel like, we're just Jews again. Okay. Our ancestors did this for many centuries, and we are the luckiest Jews in 2,000 years. So I can't complain about this, but my internal landscape has kind of reorganized.
Hi. Thank you again for coming. I loved your first book. I had to look it up just now. 5 stars on Goodreads, which is
Thank you.
very unusual for me, but I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
At the beginning of your remarks, you expressed some despondence and some futility with respect to fighting anti-Semitism. And my ears perked up because I've actually heard that sentiment expressed from a few people across the political spectrum. And I have to say, I strongly disagree with it. I think that anti-Semitism has to be aggressively and forcefully confronted in the same way that you may never solve crime, but you still have police. And then further along in your discussion, I think you've maybe provided some nuance to that position. And so I would like to ask you to unpack it a little bit more and explain a little bit more.
I think that what causes anti-Semitism to flare up and calm down is not how hard Jews fight or how good arguments we make or whether we have like the right PR campaign or tweet or education campaign. I think it's really whether there's a plague or an economic crisis. Like, I think this is like I've heard it described as a chronic disease where it's like this was injected into the Western world psyche 2,000 years ago. It's kind of embedded now in the traditions to which half the world's population practice. And these ideas are they're there. And when people are triggered, when they're anxious or stressed out, they just kind of flare back up again. And people are like, blame the Jews. I mean, I don't want to stop anyone from fighting it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's important. I also just think realistically, there are 16 million with an M of us, and there are 8 billion people in the world. And even if we got on social media all day long and all we did was just like tweet out the best arguments and videos and this and that, like that content is going to be kind of out majoritied by content from billions of other people. So I just like, I do think you can make a difference. I do think you can educate people. I do think it's worth trying. I'm certainly not, I'm not someone who's like, let's shut down the ADL. Like, that's ridiculous. Of course we should try this stuff. I just think that, you know, what worries me is that we've put so many millions and millions of dollars into being anti-Semites and into changing the haters when like we have millions of ignorant Jews, millions of Jews who don't know the Jewish story. And if resources are finite, I want to make sure Jews know the Jewish story and Jews know that the anti-Semites are wrong and that they're liars. And so this is, I mean, look, if we had infinite resources, I would say like, let's try the haters. Like I'm all for it. We can be clever. I do think we need to put some serious resources into understanding social media and algorithms. But I just think in a world of limited resources, it's like trying to bail out a tsunami with a bucket. Again, if you have trillions of dollars and you can buy trillions of buckets and get trillions, billions of people to help you, sure. But like, I just think realistically, and I think about Theodore Herzl, who's like in Paris in 1890s, this Jewish army officer, Alfred Dreyfus, is accused of treason falsely. France loses its mind. All this Jew hatred comes out. They're all against him. It's like killed the Jew. Horrible. And like, I'm just struck that Herzl was not like, let me try to educate these people. Let me try to do like a campaign. He was like, we need Israel. Right? It was just like at some point he just realized like we need to do something different. He realized he wasn't going to change their mind. And I think it's really, I just think it's really hard for 0.02% of the world's population to change a neural groove that's 2,000 years old, embedded in the minds of half the world.
Yeah, can I just take a second on this? I really appreciate your question, and I struggle with it as well. And unsurprisingly, I come out very much where Sarah is. There's at last reckoning about a month ago, in the last plus or minus about 36 months, we as an organized Jewish community have spent plus or minus about $750 million fighting anti-Semitism. And that's not to say that there hasn't been certain wins in different places, but it's also fair to say that it really hasn't gotten any better. And I think so. I think for me, and look, I happen to have the privilege and honor of running a very large foundation for Jewish education. I just look at opportunity cost, and I say, well, what would have, if we'd taken 50% of that and put that, I don't know, 15 to 20% of every young Jewish kid goes to Jewish summer camp. What would that look like if it was 30 or 40 or 50%? Well, what that would look like is that in 10, 20, 30 years, you'd have a bunch of more literate Jews who would be able to fight whatever's, there next. So I think the opportunity cost factor of it, and my line about it, for what it's worth, is that I have a theory that every country in the world has an original sin. America's is slavery. The great land where I'm from is colonialism gone absolutely crazy. France has that too. And you go around the country in the world, the world's original sin is anti-Semitism. And if you're talking about the world's original sin, then you say to yourself, wow, that is a really, really difficult one to excavate from. And again, I want to be on record as saying that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. But again, I think the best antidote for anti-Semitism is Semitism and raising as many proud, knowledge, literate Jews as we possibly can.
I also think, like, fighting for liberalism, and I don't mean progressivism. I mean like rule of law, democratic ideas, like, illiberal countries, anti-Semitism thrives, right? It's a conspiracy theory. So just like, it's not a shock that as the U.S. is becoming more and more illiberal, anti-Semitism is just flourishing on both sides of the aisle. And I'm done with the people being like, it's over there. No, it's on the right, it's on the left, it's across the spectrum. So I think like trying to invest in like stabilizing society, I think that would be a good idea as well. So I don't know. I mean, and again, I take the pushback. Like it feels very pessimistic. It feels like I'm just defeatist and giving up. And I know, but I'm actually not. Like I actually think like I'm obsessed with Jewish education and like making sure Jews are educated because I actually think that's one of the best ways to fight anti-Semitism. So maybe I misstated it because like I think Jewish education is the best way to fight anti-Semitism. So I guess I'm not against fighting anti-Semitism. I'm more against fighting anti-Semitism by trying to like make anti-Semites like us. That's I think where I don't think that's I just don't think that's an effective strategy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question or just to get your feeling on this. So it's clear, Zionism, non-Zionism, the differences and friends that are lost. I'm finding I'm very supportive of Israel, but I don't support our president. And I have been beaten up on certain posts, which after October 7th, I thought, these are my people. I'm here in a safe place. And the infighting there is ugly. So, I mean, back to the, it's not to fight anti-Semitism. If we're fighting between ourselves, the bifurcation is causing even more destruction. What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is such an important thing. Like, I'm so exhausted with like the purity testing in the Jewish community and the like, you're a traitor, you're not. Like, look, for me, I do draw a line at anti-Zionism. I do say like, when people are like a Jewish state shouldn't exist, and maybe some of them do so for understandable reasons. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying they're not Jews, but like, I'm not interested in like, I'm like, that to me is kind of a red line. Once you're kind of in the tent of like, okay, I think this state should exist, but like, let me tell you my criticisms, I'm right there with you. I want to hear it. Yes, I have a lot of criticisms. There are a lot of problems in Israel right now. And if you think there aren't, like, I'd urge you to crawl out from under the rock you've been living in for the last 3 decades. So I think I would really like us to be a lot more tolerant of the people who are in the tent of sane norminess, right? Like if you are a sane normie Jew, like come in, like the extremists on both sides, I don't have a lot of patience for that. But like if you're in the 70% that's like, okay, we're Jews, we're in it, let's just try to help our family in Israel and figure this out. I don't care where you fall on that spectrum, and I'd really like people to stop tearing each other apart. I mean, just like the criticisms, look, do I agree with every single thing that this Jewish organization does or that? I don't. And will I behind the scenes be like, hey guys, didn't love that. Like, can we talk? But posting about them, trashing, just like, at some point, if you are in the tent of just reasonableness, can we just work together and not tear each other apart? And can we give each other the benefit of the doubt? It is not helpful. I mean, I cannot tell you, I haven't gotten any criticism from the left, interestingly, but I've definitely gotten a number of very weird emails from the right, which is like, how dare you work for Kamala Harris, why don't you go eat a bacon cheeseburger at Wendy's? I'm like, so many problems with this email. Number one, like, I never worked for Kamala Harris, I worked for Michelle Obama, a different black woman, weird. And second of all, like Wendy's, like, does that even exist anymore? Like, I wouldn't go to Wendy's. Like, what? Why are they doing this, right? Like, I'm in their, I can't, like that is, so I think staying away from those people, giving those people not a lot of airtime, I think like trying to fight back on a public post, I actually think it's better to DM those people quietly. Don't give them more airtime, right? This is what they want,
I guess I'm sorry, but it's also the politics. They're saying this is your time to praise Donald Trump.
Right. This is, and look, like, when you're forced to say like, well, you've got to praise this left-wing person or this right, you have to do this or that. It's like, no, you don't. Actually, like, we can agree to disagree, right? We can like, I don't know, the whole, again, the public purity test and if you don't say this thing or do this thing, you're a traitor and you're bad. Like, I really reject all of that. I think we need to, like, the people on the extremes, I'm ready to kind of let them go, and like the 70% of us kind of in the reasonable middle, can we just like tone it down a notch and try to work together? I'm really done with the critiques I'm done with it. Not helpful.
as a former speechwriter, intellectually, that's one way of communicating. Then you are an author and now rabbi in training, it sounds like. And sort of intellectually and also just communication-wise, what is it about speechwriting that you sort of gravitate, you either think, you learn from, but also gravitated away from? And sort of how does that come into how you think about communicating rabbinically? And then if you sort of go back to what you were just saying, if you were writing a speech for someone who was trying to sort of reclaim the Jewish identity, especially on the left, which you sort of came from, what is that speech? How would you do that, especially in light of what's going on in New York right now, too?
Yeah, great question. I never want to write a speech for anyone else again. I loved doing it. It was such an honor. Like, I stayed all 8 years in the Obama administration, where people usually last about 18 months in the White House. A lot of us stayed all 8 years because it was an amazing place to work, and I worked for amazing people. The art of speechwriting is really about taking boring, complex, kind of hard to understand material and really pulling out its beating heart, making it come alive, making it hit people where they are. It's like the policy person will be like, okay, our plan bends the cost curve, and healthcare spending is a percentage of the GDP, and like, can people see the doctor they want to see? What will they pay each month, right? It's like, where does this hit people where they actually live and breathe? And I think that, particularly on the left, when I'm talking to people who are on the left about these issues, like, I tend to try to use their language, right? So when I'm like, when they're like, these white Israelis are oppressing brown Palestinians, I'm like, ooh, hey, can we stop a minute? Like, I don't know if you know, but like many Jews lived in Arab countries. They were persecuted and had to flee. 50% of Jews in Israel would be considered Jews of color, people of color in the U.S. So you are right now disappearing the bodies and lives of experiences of millions of people of color. And I just want you to check your privilege. Like, I talked to, it's a little snarky. I'm like so close to being a neocon now. And like, I also talk about, like, I really try to help young American Jews understand their privilege, right? Like, you don't see a lot of anti-Zionists outside of America. And I try to help them understand, like, I'm so glad that you've been safe here. That's really important. But millions of Jews have not had the privilege that you have here today. And I will make that analogy to segregation. Like, would you ever say this to Black Americans? I also like to really point out the white supremacy on the left that is just so strong, where it's like, oh my gosh, Hamas, they're people of color. We really, like, all they can do is terrorism because they're oppressed. It's like, that is so profoundly racist and condescending. Like, actually, these are some of the most brilliant strategic minds in the world. Like, you look at the evolution of Hamas and how strategic they are. They're steps ahead of us. Like Dan Senor actually had a great podcast in the last few days where his guest was sort of tracking the evolution of Hamas from, like, Muslim Brotherhood people who provided social welfare to terrorists who murder everyone to their new iteration, which is integrating into the UN and diplomacy and kind of this like, these people are brilliant. They made decisions, right? They did a coup, took over Gaza, spent hundreds of millions of dollars building tunnels and buying weapons. These were decisions that people with cognitive capacity and moral agency made, and to rob them of that is really dehumanizing and racist. So I kind of try to just like talk to them in that kind of language, and to also just like educate them a little bit on history. So I think, like, again, it's like meeting people where they are. If you're going to give people on the left the old Hasbro talking points, it's not going to go well. I think it's more like, what do they care about? They care about oppressor, oppressed. They care about privilege. They care about people of color. It's like, okay, let's use what we can here. You can think maybe this is gross, and I feel a little bit gross doing it sometimes, but it is somewhat effective. Oh, and as for the New York election, I find Mamdani utterly appalling, just utterly and totally appalling. I strongly disagree, as you might imagine, with some of my former colleagues on this. When someone hurls around my identity, Zionist, as a slur, as an insult, when someone uses words like settler colonialism and genocide as if they are settled facts rather than accusations that need to be backed up with facts, when someone has just spent his entire life being utterly obsessed with Israel and this incredibly like preoccupied, just this is like his one kind of obsession for all of his activism, all of his life, like, I find that deeply, deeply disturbing. And, I'm really glad to see Democrats like Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill win. Like, I think that's hopeful. But I worry, if that were the future of the Democratic Party, I would be so happy. I worry that when millions of college-educated people will soon be out of work because of AI, Something that Mamdani has done that I find chilling, and I don't think has been done so explicitly before by a famous politician, is to really connect struggle here at home with blaming Israel. Like, he was pretty clear that, like, you know, we're taking good money away from people who are struggling here at home and using it to fund Israeli apartheid. And that direct connection scares me. And it scares me that it's the exact same thing is happening on the right. That's what America First is. And you combine that with Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and the Heritage Foundation, and a kind of rising Jews killed Jesus vibe in some parts of the Christian world. Like, I just see, I see this horseshoe closing, and it makes me very nervous, which is why, again, like, my focus on liberalism, on rule of law, on these kind of like much more, you know, sane normie values, I think is so important for Jews. But I don't love the direction at all.
All right. Are we one more?
You have one more. Yeah, you know what? We're going to take one more.
Okay, yep.
I just want to remind you all that we're going to be having a signing in the atrium immediately after, so please stick around for that. I would love to talk to any of you that can stay. And also, Paul just reminded me that we have Rabbi Angela Bookdahl, who came up on stage. She's going to be here on December 3rd.
Definitely go
Please
see her.
join
She's
us.
wonderful.
She's wonderful. It'll be a very special evening. We're actually going to be doing it at Emmanuel because we've outgrown our space. So please come for that, December 3rd.
Hi. So my question is really to ask your comment on what you feel is going on at our universities, you know, DEI, blah, blah, blah. Do you feel that, you know, our schools are being infiltrated by international money? Like, what is the dynamic? And what are some of the solutions beyond President Trump's approach?
Yeah. So I mean, look, Qatar is getting its money's worth with its billions of dollars of money going into the U.S. That's into universities. I think that's certainly for sure. I think there are really bigger forces that it's funny, I literally just emailed a couple of friends to be like, I need to better understand the kind of system in which Mamdani was soaked. Like, this is kind of a much broader effort that has to do with like anti-colonial thinking. There's just like a whole intellectual history and legacy to this that has been making its way through many universities for many decades. And I don't understand it very well, so I don't think I can give you as good a response as I should. One thing, you know, in terms of solutions, I think number one, Jews voting with their feet. I'm thrilled to see Jews going to the Vanderbilts and Emory's and Tulane's and University of Alabama and Florida. Like, there are lots of schools that are actually great places to be Jews. And we don't have to pay $80,000 a year to be abused. And I'm actually happy to see students voting with their feet. And I think that's ultimately what's going to change universities, is them losing money and students. You know, in terms of Trump's response, I mean, I don't love it, because I think it's really, it's not actually fighting anti-Semitism, defunding scientific research. Like, my friends, you know, I have many Jewish friends who run these labs who are now scrambling to do their research. It's not actually helping anti-Semitism much. It's just people are now blaming Jews, whether probably because of anti-Semitism, but whether fairly or unfairly. I also would just say two more things. Like, this is now paving a very, very dangerous way, because, you know, let's say you have a different president in 5 or 10 years who says that Israel is a terrorist entity and any Hillel is supporting a terrorist entity. So any university with a vibrant Hillel, it's going to have to be defunded. So you got to get rid of your Hillel. We just paved the way. Right? This is like, that is the illiberal way that has been paved. I'd also just point out that to, you know, some of my Jewish friends on the right who are like, we got to just like really crack down on speech and have this definition that says that whatever you're saying, it's anti-Semitism, and we're going to be heavy-handed and we're going to punish. That's what people did in 2020 and 2021 around DEI. There was a lot of speech policing. It was kind of heavy-handed, and it was a really good mission, I think. I'm for diversity and equity and inclusion, but it was executed in a way that I think was a lot of blaming, shaming, and speech policing. You are now seeing a massive backlash to that. So, like, all right, Jews, if you would like to replicate that strategy, call me in a few years and let me know how it goes. You know, people do not like to be blamed, shamed, and policed. It really doesn't actually, I don't think that's a great way to fight anti-Semitism. I think better ways are Jews voting with their feet. I think alumni voting with their feet is a good idea. And I think really rethinking DEI so that it's truly embracing diversity, which includes Trump voters and includes evangelical Christians and includes Republicans and rural folks. Like, diversity is actually bigger than just the category, the few favored oppressed categories, embracing real diversity would be very challenging for a lot of these universities. But I think if you're committed to that, I think you can have good DEI. So I think it's really about replacing bad DEI with good DEI.
All right, so I will just quickly close with two things. First of all, thank you for the thoughtful questions and for everybody being here.
Very thoughtful, thank you.
As Sarah mentioned, one of the things that we're doing at the Jim Joseph Foundation and together with the Shalom Hartman Institute is training a new set of rabbis for North America, and we're in the midst of cohort 1. Sarah is joining cohort 2, and one of the theories behind that program was, could we attract the best and brightest to be our rabbis? Tonight, you saw a shining example.
Right back at you, Barry.
Tonight, you saw a shining example of the best and brightest, and I just want to call out, it's not just because she is incredibly smart, it's not just because she's an amazing author, it's not just because she's written a couple of great, amazing books that have won prizes. It's also, I think, mostly because Sarah embodies the art of what it means to be a lifelong learner. She admits she has far more knowledge than I think most of us in the room, yet she approaches it with an enormous amount of humility, recognizing that she is only 5% on the way. So it's been a real privilege to share the stage with you, and she will be outside signing furiously, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you all.